right, I'd like to welcome everybody to this incredibly special event, to everybody who's joining us tonight. My name is Sarah Cantor, and I head the Marketing and Events Division at Nefesh B'Nefesh. We are joined tonight by some absolutely spectacular guests. We have with us, speaking first is Major General Aluf Eliza Shkadi, although I understand he prefers maybe not as many formalities. We have Aryeh Halivni, who founded Toldot Yisrael, and we have Marty Herskovitz, who started the Creating Memory Initiative. Just a little introduction to where we are here. For those of you who are joining us from outside of Israel, you may have not experienced this current period of time that we're in right now. It's an emotional period of time. We are right now in between Yom Hashoah, which is the Israeli Holocaust Remembrance Day. And later this week, we will have Yom HaZikaron, which is our Remembrance Day for fallen soldiers and victims of terror, and Yom Haatzmaut, which is the Israeli Independence Day. It's a unique experience to be here during this time. I guess after a number of years post-Aliyah, you grow to expect it, but you can feel the emotions in the air. On one hand, you have decorations of Israeli flags and people are getting excited to celebrate. And on the other hand, we have sirens and moments of silence and just the deep sadness for the people who have gotten us to this point. It has recently been called the 10 Days of Gratitude for the people who are just thankful for everybody who's contributed to the founding of the state. And there's a quote that I've seen going around that says, we have two Memorial Days every year in Israel. One is to remind us of the cost of having a state, and one to remind us of the cost of not. And on that note, the three speakers who are joining us tonight, I believe truly bridge the past, the present, the future. We are going to hear their stories and their experiences about the history and how they are contributing to the modern state of Israel. Up first, I am absolutely honored to be speaking with Major General Aluf in Hebrew, Eliza Shkadi, who is a second-generation Holocaust survivor. He has devoted his life to the service of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, and has risen to the ranks in the Air Force and in the private sector in Israel. So, Eliezer, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, shalom. It is a great honor and a pleasure to be here and to speak in front of such a distinguished audience in this unique virtual event. I thought to myself, what should I talk about? And I tell you what I am planning. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'll tell you about my father, and I'll tell you 4 stories that influenced me, and I assume they mean a lot to all of us. I'm Eliza Shkadi. I'm married and I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. I served in the Israeli Air Force for 33 years, more than 4 years as the commander of the Israeli Air Force. Then I was the CEO and the president of El Al, the Israel Airlines. And now I am leading about 15 startups dealing with education, social issues, and values. And I'm doing it voluntarily. My father, Moshe Mandel Shkadi, was born in Hungary in a village named Tolchva. In 1944, he jumped from a train and he reached the Glass House. Glass House was a unique place in Budapest. And his mission every day was to go out and to bring schutzpasses to Jewish people across Budapest. Schutzpass was a fake Swiss certificate. So if the Nazis will catch them, at least they will have something in their hands as the Schutzpass. After the war, he came back to his village, to Tolchva, and he waited there about 2 years. 2 years waiting, hoping that someone will come back. Unfortunately, no one came back. And then he understood that he was alone in the world. Just imagine, young man alone in the world. The fact that I'm talking to you today is in a way a miracle by itself. And I can say without a doubt then that all the people that are watching now this video, the fact that they are alive is a miracle. Some of them has stories of their family like my father, and some different stories, but a miracle. And some had a unique and unbelievable miracle because the Nazis didn't reach the countries that their parents were or their grandfather there was. Like my mother, she was born in Egypt and she came to Palestine, and the Nazis didn't reach there. And the family of my mother had an amazing miracle. My father decided to make Aliyah. He came to Israel alone and devoted all his life to education. The first story is a story about the flight over Auschwitz. In 2003, we got an invitation to participate in an air show in Warsaw, Poland. Honestly, we didn't want to participate. Why? It's a big headache, means nothing. But then came one of the base commander in those days, General Eshel. He was a commander of Tel Nof Air Force Base, and he came with an idea. The idea was, let's participate in the air show, and we'll do a flight over Auschwitz. Very symbolic flight that probably means a lot to all of us. We sent 4 F-15s to Poland. These 4 F-15s participated in the air show. And in those days, I was the deputy commander of the Israeli Air Force. I talked every day with General Eshel. We didn't talk about the air show. We talked only about the flight over Auschwitz. And General Eshel told me, you know, the Polish people do not allow us to fly over Auschwitz. Why? Because they say it's a peace area. Sure, all of us understand what kind of peace it was. Anyhow, we decided to do 2 things. He will try to get the permission in Poland with the ambassador, with the authorities there, and I will try to do it in Israel with the Minister of Defense and all the authorities in Israel. We didn't succeed. The day that they should fly back to Israel arrived, and we talked, and he told me, you know, at the end, the Polish people allow us to fly over Auschwitz only in very high altitude. That means nothing. Anyhow, I heard him and I said, Eshel, the last time the Polish people told us what to do was 65 years ago. I trust you. Do what you have to do. Fly in low altitude. And if the Polish people have complaints, they can call me. Okay. General Eshel, with the formation of the F-15s, flew in low altitude over Auschwitz. You know probably you know the famous picture of Auschwitz. And when I finished my job as the Israeli Air Force commander, I decided to give a gift to each and every unit and each and every commander and general in the Air Force and in the Israel Defense Forces, to the commander of the Mossad, the commander of the Shabak, the Minister of Defense, the Prime Minister, and the President of Israel. And I wrote a symbolic words that means a lot. The words was like this: the Israeli Air Force over Auschwitz, on behalf of the State of Israel and the Jewish nation, remember, never forget, rely only on ourselves. Did you hear something from the Polish people? neither me. They still can call me. Who cares? The second story is about the commander of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. When I became the commander of the Israeli Air Force, I understood that the commander of the Luftwaffe is waiting for an invitation to come to visit Israel. Why? Because my predecessor, General Chalutz, visited Germany, and he expected us to invite him. As you can understand the story of my life and my father's life, the last thing I wanted to do is to meet him and to host the commander of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. So I didn't send an invitation. They came to me, invite him. I just ignored. A couple of months later, my people came to me and they said, General Shkadi, we understand why you do not want to invite the commander of the Luftwaffe. But it caused a big damage to the state of Israel and to the Air Force. We would like to ask you to rethink about the idea. I thought, and I realized that I should send an invitation. I sent an invitation, hoping that he will not come to Israel. But General Stiglitz was very happy and he said, I will come as soon as possible with a big delegation. Okay, what is the procedure when a delegation like this is coming to Israel? Doing a big ceremony, big order, big dinner with all the commanders and the generals of the Israeli Air Force and with the delegation, and then they visit the Air Force bases. In a dinner like this, usually the commanders and the generals of the Israeli Air Force are eating with the general and his delegation. Most of the time, the commanders do not want to participate in this kind of dinner. But since the Air Force commander inviting them, they have no other alternative and they should come if they have no other excuse. Anyhow, this time I told my secretary, Avital, great lady, and I told her, send the commanders the invitation, but say to them that only commanders and generals that feel comfortable to eat with the commander of the Luftwaffe should come. All the others, if they do not feel comfortable, should not come. The worst case scenario will be that I will eat with my wife and with General Stiglitz and his delegation. The evening arrived, and it was, I think, the first time in the history of the Air Force that all the commanders and all their wives came to the dinner. General Stiglitz was very excited, and he read a speech from a paper. Usually we are talking fluently without papers. And I felt terrible. Pictures from the past was there in my head. Anyhow, at the end of the dinner, General Stiglitz told me, General Shkadi, I would like to invite you and to host you in the Luftwaffe in Germany, Berlin. But I would like you to say that you will come tonight in front of everybody. I told him, thank you very much, General Stiglitz. Do not invite me. Anyhow, he visited the Israeli Air Force and flew back to Germany. And he began to send me invitations to come to Germany. As you can understand, I ignored. I didn't want to go, so I didn't fly. After 3 years, I realized that I should go to Germany. I set a delegation and a date, and I thought to myself, I cannot fly to Germany without talking with my father. I came to my father. I told him, Abba, I intend to fly to Germany, to the German Air Force, to the Luftwaffe. What do you say? You didn't know my father? He looked at me, said nothing, silent. After a couple of seconds, he said, very good. I want you to go there. I want them to see you with your uniform. I want them to see you with your wings, ranks, hat with a symbol. I want them to play the anthem, and I want them to salute you. Okay. I came back to my house, and we flew to Germany. Winter 2008. Freezing, freezing, freezing. We were on our way to the big ceremony, the big order. In Germany, the German soldiers and officers are familiar with the weather there, so they wear the uniform and a big coat, and on their coat were the ranks and the wings and whatever. We are coming from Israel with a very thin uniform, and all our ranks and wings and whatever are on our uniform, and the coat is cover everything. I remembered what my father's dream was, and I say to my delegation, we are going out without the coat. Freezing, freezing. General Stiglitz looked at me and said, are you crazy? I told him, this is what I want. Anyhow, we went out. Huge ceremony, huge number of soldiers, officers, pilots, generals. They played the anthem and they saluted. I never felt so warm in my whole life when they saluted to the son of Moshe Mandel Shkadi on the land of Germany in Berlin. In a way, they saluted to all of us. The third story is about my father and an open question that he had all his life. My father was a really unique person. He loved people, people loved him. But he had one open question that he didn't have the answer. The question was, why did I survive and all my family was murdered by the Nazis? I told him, Father, you jumped from a train. You was not with your family. What could you do? Means nothing to him. Why did I survive and all my family was murdered? He talked about this issue and this open question all the time with me and with my sister, Yael. In 2007, the Israeli Air Force attacked and destroyed the nuclear reactor in Syria. After the attack, Prime Minister in those days, Olmert, sent me a letter with a lot of compliments to the Israeli Air Force, what we did, how we did, and the most important part, what is the meaning of this destroying this nuclear reactor in Syria for the survival of the state of Israel and of the Jewish nation. He knew the story of my father, and at the end of the letter, he wrote in his handwriting, warm regards to your father. In those days, it was top secret. I couldn't talk about it with anyone, even with myself. So what will I do? I decided I will not show the letter to my father. Year passed, beginning of 2015, I understood that my father is going to pass away. He didn't talk, almost didn't talk, and he was in a very bad conditions. But you can see, I could see in his eyes, deep blue eyes, that he understood everything. So I decided this is the time. I took the letter, I came to him, and I read him the letter. And then something happened, unbelievable thing happened. From his blue eyes, tears began to cry. And I saw big relief in his whole body. I don't know if this is what happened, but this is what I think that happened. I think that in the first time in his whole life, he got the answer to the open question that bothered him all his life, through his son, through the Israeli Air Force, and through the meaning of doing something for the survival of the state of Israel and of the Jewish nation. A couple of weeks later, he passed away. The last story is a very unique story. But I think that it concludes everything. It concludes everything. When I was the Israeli Air Force commander, I got an invitation to almost each and every event in Israel. Why? Not because my name is Shkadi, but because of the fact that when the Israeli Air Force commander is coming to an event, it's a big issue, and the event considered as a very important event. Honestly, I just do not like events. I prefer to talk with you much more than to be in the best of the best event in Israel or abroad. Anyway, I had an agreement with my secretary, Avital, that every time I got an invitation, she should say, thank you very much, Shkadi is very busy, has a lot of work to do, he will not participate, unfortunately. One day she came to me and she said, you know, you have an invitation to eat dinner with President Peres and with the President of Hungary. I told her, Avital, the regular way, tell them that I'm very busy, I will not participate. Okay, a couple of weeks later, we talked about, she came to me and we talked about what is going to be next week. And she said, this day you are eating dinner with President Peres and the President of Hungary. I told her, how comes? Didn't I ask you to cancel it? And she, with a small smile, she said, I thought you're doing a mistake. I didn't cancel. To me. I thought to myself, now I had two alternatives. The first one, to kill her. The second one is to think maybe she's right and I'm wrong. I thought about it and I realized that probably she's right and I'm wrong. I told her, you know, call the president's office and tell them that I would like to bring my father with me. She went out of my room, and after a couple of minutes, she came back, smiling. Of course, President Peres would love to invite your father to this dinner. Okay, now I called my father, told him, Abba, President Peres would like to invite you to a dinner with him and with the President of Hungary. If you come, I will join you. You already know my father. Silent on the other side of the line. After a couple of seconds, he said, I will come. Okay. The day arrived. I took my car, I took my father, and both of us drove toward Jerusalem. Silent in the car, silent. I with my thoughts, he with his thoughts. Before we entered Jerusalem, my father asked me, do you understand what's going on? I told him, of course, father, we are going to eat dinner with President Peres, with the President of Hungary, and with all the guests that will be there. And later on, I'll bring you back home. Then he looked at me and he said, you understand nothing. And he began, like in Passover, in Chad Gadya, when we are singing Chad Gadya, like this. I, Moshe Mandel Shkadi, is coming to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel and the capital of the Jewish nation. From the beginning, I'm intended to meet with President Peres, who is the president of the state of Israel and the president of the Jewish nation. From the beginning, Moshe Mandel Shkadi, Jerusalem, President Peres. I'm coming with my son, who is the commander of the Israeli Air Force and the commander of the Jewish Air Force. This is the title that my father gave to me. From the beginning, Moshe Mandel Shkadi, Jerusalem, President Peres, my son. I'm going to meet the president of Hungary that 65 years ago, the value of our lives in Hungary was less than a value of a dead dog. The beginning. Eliza Shkadi, Jerusalem, President Peres, my son, the value of my life. I'm going to meet the president of Hungary that does not know yet that he is going to apologize. And he said, you know, if someone would have asked me 65 years ago to dream the most amazing, unbelievable dream, no way that I could have dreamed about something very small, small part of the reality of what we have here. No doubt that our nation suffered the biggest catastrophe in the Holocaust. And no doubt that now, today, these days, we are in the middle of the biggest miracle of the Jewish nation ever, the state of Israel. And if you're wondering if the president of Hungary apologized, you didn't know my father, he had no other alternative, he apologized. I would like to sum up with 3 sentences. The first one is remember, never forget, rely only on ourselves. The second one is dare to dream, act, do, remember that even the sky is not the limit. The limit, I know a little bit about it, and you can ask my father in the sky. And the last thing I would like to say, on behalf of my father in the sky, on behalf of myself, and I allow myself to say, on behalf of all of us. May God, who makes peace in heaven above, bring peace to all mankind and for Israel. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
All the best to you.
Thank you so much. This was incredibly meaningful, and I appreciate you sharing your story with us and the stories of your father and your family. I hope everybody who's listening is feeling a little bit, sort of what I'm feeling, just in awe of your contribution and everything that you've given us. So thank you so much for being here.
All the best.
Thank you.
Bye.
So up next, we have Aryeh Halivni, who is the founder and executive director of Toldot Israel. Aryeh, can you turn your video on, please? Excellent. Nice to see you. Aryeh is the founder and executive director of Toldot Israel, an organization which has recorded the stories and testimonies of those who fought in the War of Independence in 1948. This is, without a doubt, a project of national importance, and the videos as such are archived in the Israeli National Library. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. And tough to follow such a fascinating presentation that I just heard. I want to start with a couple verses and psukim that we are familiar with to talk about the idea of memory. The first is Zechor Yemot Olam Binu Shnot Dor Vador She'al Avicha V'Yagedcha Zekenecha V'Yomru Lach. Remember the days long gone, ponder the years of each generation, ask your father and let him tell you, and your grandfather who will explain it. And the other is the verse that we are all very familiar with, certainly coming on the heels of the Seder Passover for Pesach, V'higadat levincha bayom hahu, and you should tell your children on that day. So here we have these two ideas of sharing our stories, but one, it's the story where we have an obligation to ask our parents and grandparents to tell us their stories so that we can get a better understanding. And the other is the obligation that we have to share with the next generation. And this is an idea of how within Judaism, we stress the idea of transmission of our own personal stories, of our own national story and of our memories so that these ideas can move on. The question that I generally ask when I'm speaking with a group is, how many people have had the opportunity to hear a Holocaust survivor tell their own personal story? And generally, when I ask this question in any kind of affiliated group, almost all the hands go up, because we as a community have done a great job ensuring that these stories are preserved. And we have done a great job to make sure that people know the stories and the testimonies and the accounts of the Holocaust. We've done it with programs in our synagogues and in our schools and in March of the Living, and et cetera. And then I asked them if they ever had the opportunity to hear somebody who was involved or witness to the founding of the State of Israel tell their own personal story. And unless I'm in an unusual group, very few hands go up. I myself, I grew up in Bnei Akiva, and I had never heard anybody tell their own personal story about the founding of the State of Israel. And this was striking to me. And this was something which really, years ago already, it had occurred to me. And we made Aliyah in 2002 with Nefesh B'Nefesh. You can see over here, a picture from our Aliyah, which was this was a picture from the first flight from Nefesh B'Nefesh. And I was working here at an organization called Gesher. And about 5 years later, I decided that I had to go check out and see that this question that I had, whether anybody had recorded the stories. I'd been inspired by the project that Steven Spielberg had done, Yad Vashem had done, where they had interviewed Holocaust survivors telling their own personal testimonies. And I had assumed that somebody had done something like this about the founding of Israel. And I went around and I visited all the different archives and met with historians and public figures and discovered that no one had done it. No one had ever gone in any kind of comprehensive way and recorded the stories of Israel's founding generation. So I quit my job and I set up a nonprofit called Toldot Israel. And that's what we've been doing for the last several years. We've been recording the firsthand accounts of people who were eyewitness to the founding or participated in the founding of Israel. And at this stage, we have about 1,300 people that we've interviewed, over 4,000 hours of footage. What I'd like to do is to share with you this evening or this afternoon, depending where you are, a little bit about what these interviews are, what kind of stories we've managed to record, a little bit about what we've learned, and to share with you a couple clips from these interviews that you can see, and kind of tie it in to this period that we're in right now, which Sarah had mentioned earlier, this period, this transition from Yom Hashoah, from Holocaust Remembrance Day, through Yom HaZikaron and Yom Haatzmaut, Israel's Remembrance Day, and Israel Independence Day. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what these interviews are. The first question that we ask people when we come to interview them is how far back they can talk about their own family. Where did their family come from? Did they know their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents? And this does a couple things for us. One is it sets the person at ease. We're interviewing people who were born in 1930 or earlier. So these are people who are in their 90s at this point. And we're coming to their home and we're asking them these questions, but instead of it being an interrogation, where were you on this day and what did you do and what do you remember about this? We open with something that's a lot more sets them at ease. Talk about your family, where'd they come from? So that's one part of it. But the other part that it does is that this question connects this one generation, the generation of the founding of Israel. It connects them to previous generations and previous parts of Jewish history. So for example, we've interviewed a woman whose uncle, Avshalom Feinberg, was a member of Nili, the spy organization under the Ottoman Empire. Interviewed people whose grandparents were part of Bilu, the first Aliyah. We interviewed two different people who were named respectively for their great-grandfather, whose name was Yehoshua Stempfer, who at the age of 17 in 1869 walked from Hungary to Palestine. It took him 5 months, but he was a Zionist before Herzl and before the official foundings of the Zionist movement. And he went on to be one of the founders of Petach Tikva. So this is something that connects these stories to this one generation about the founding of Israel. One of the things that it does also is that it helps get the background to understand where these people came from. So by the time we get to the story about the War of Independence or about the different underground movements that they were involved in, the story is that much richer because they have shared with us what they're made of. They have shared with us where they came from. At this point, we have interviewed every living general who fought in Israel's War of Independence. We even interviewed one of General Shkadi's predecessors, Dan Tolkovsky, who's now 100 years old. He was the head of the Air Force 1953 to 1958. We've interviewed government ministers, ambassadors, directors of the Mossad, president, 25 Israel Prize winners. And what's fascinating is we're asking these people, we have the perspective of when we're meeting with them, they're now in their 90s, and we go back, often when you see somebody when they're young, you're like, I think that person's gonna go far. I've got a good feeling about them. And we're asking these people, what were you like when you were 18? Reflect back and to talk about those stories. The interviews themselves are not only about the underground movements in the War of Independence, they're about what life was like during that time, about life was like during the British Mandate, what things, people that were involved in culture, what they did, what school was like, what the youth movements were like. And these stories really paint a very rich picture of that period and give us a much greater understanding about the founding of Israel. One of the components that we did a few years ago was we got some funding from the Davidson Foundation to focus on the contribution of Americans to the founding of the state. And we did a special unit where we interviewed 150 people who talked about how they had played a role in Israel's founding. Most people, myself included, didn't really know a lot about these stories. There's people who raised money. There's people who were involved in smuggling weapons. There's people who came and volunteered to fight in 1948. And the stories are fascinating. And that was the one point in the project where we actually opened it up to second generation interviews. Other than that, all the interviews have been first person, firsthand accounts. And here we were interviewing people who, some of them were telling their parents' stories, but some of these second generation interviews were actually with people who are already 90 years old and older. There's a couple themes that came across over the course of these interviews. One is ordinary people living in extraordinary times. You might think that some of these people, like that they're larger than life, but what was fascinating was that most of the people did not consider themselves heroes. These were people who looked at what they had done as obvious, as what else could they possibly do? This was something, there was no real choice for them, and this is what they chose to do. And that was one of the things that was fascinating, was these people who were placed at the specific time and rose to the occasion and really proved themselves to be heroes. The second thing is about how people made choices. This is something that had fascinated me from the outset of the project. And part of it was that if I had been born, if I lived at some other time, then I wish I could have lived at this time as the founding of the state. But I would try and imagine, what would I have done? Would I have had the courage to do some of the things that these people had done? And I've always been fascinated by this idea of choices, about how people decided whether they were going to be involved or not, or whether they were going to join the Palmach or join the Lehi, or what role that they might want to play. And what I'd like to do is to show a couple different clips that, that illustrate some of these choices, and also will take us through this passage and progression of the story of the Shoah, connecting that, connecting the idea to the founding of the State of Israel, and also including the idea of Aliyah, as this is a Nefesh B'Nefesh event, which shows some of the challenges of Aliyah 70 odd years ago, which were much greater than the challenges that those of us today have had to face. The first clip is with David Ben David, who shares his story. This is an excerpt from a longer film about different kinds of Aliyah. And he'll share his story here.
אבא שלי היה יהודי חרדי, היהדות באותו הזמן או שהייתה מתבוללת, או שנחזו באמונה הגדולה שתבוא גאולה ניסית, אבל בינתיים עלינו להישאר שמה בגולה ולהתמודד עם האנטישמיות, עם הגלות. קרה לי נס גדול, ובגיל צעיר מאוד, בגיל 16.5, הבנתי שיש בעולם תנועה ציונית, תנועה חלוצית, ויש לבנות את ארץ ישראל, וצריך להתנתק מן העולם הזה ולעבור לעולם העשייה. בגיל 17 עזבתי את העולם החרדי ועברתי לעולם הציוני, החלוצי. אני יצאתי להכשרה עם כובע חרדי. כשהרכבת התחילה לזוז, זרקתי את הכובע מן החלון, לבשתי את הקסקט כזה, כמו שהחלוצים הראשונים, ואז נולדתי מחדש. לאונייה הזו אין מצפן, אין תקשורת, ואונייה יכולה לסחוף 300-400 איש, היינו 1,200 אנשים ונשים וטף, תנאים איומים, והיינו 3 חודשים על הים, ואז על הפחם, האונייה הייתה בנויה מעץ, התחילו לפרק הכל מעץ, את המיטות ואת הקירות, אין איפה לישון, ואתה כמעט נפל לים, כן כבר קירות, הכל תחת עדות, כדי להניע את האונייה במקום פחם. וכשהגענו לחוף ארץ ישראל, האונייה הייתה כבר נראית כמו דג מלוח החול, ראית? כמעט ונפלנו לים כולנו. הצטווינו להוריד עוגן, ואנחנו לא יודעים מה זוממים האנגלים לעשות איתנו. ועבר יום ועוד יום ועוד יום, ואני החלטתי לברוח. מן הסיפון יורד שם חבל. השתלשלנו על החבל וקפצנו לתוך הים, והתחלתי לשחות. מהכניסה לנמל, וכל הזמן פה יש סירות, פה יש אוניות, פה יש זה. ואני שוחה ושוחה, ולא הייתי שחיין, מי יודע מה. ואין לי כוח, ואני עומד לטבוע, והידיים כואבות לי, וגל פלט אותי על החול, וככה הגעתי לארץ ישראל. ערום ויחב לבד, בודד, כן. לא משפחה, לא מכירים, לא שום דבר. טוב, עשיתי מה שכל יהודי עושה, נשקתי אדמת ארץ ישראל. נמל חיפה מבוצר, המון צבא ועמדות, ואני מתחיל לזחול על 4 שלו, יראו אותי וזוחל. ואני רואה איזה חנות נעליים שסוגרים אותו כבר לקראת שבת. אז אני שואל, איפה כאן סניף בני עקיבא? גיליתי את המועדון, כולם מלובשים בגדי שבת, ואני כזה לא מגולח כל הזמן. ואני בא למדריך ואומר לו, תראה, אני ברחתי מהפטריה, אין איפה להיות בשבת. אז הוא הזמין אותי אליו לשבת. אחרי שנה שלא ראיתי שולחן יהודי, שולחן שבת יהודי, 9 חודשים במחנה ריכוז, 3 חודשים באונייה. משהו גדול מאוד, קשה לתאר מה זה היה בשבילי.
The second clip is from one of the first interviews that we recorded. And it was a story that really inspired me, something that just really struck a chord. Harold Katz, who had grown up in Terre Haute, Indiana, and shares his story in this brief excerpt. The interview was so polished and so inspiring, and is probably one of my favorite interviews out of all that we've done. But really shares some of these journey and experiences, certainly as an American, moving toward the story, connecting to the Shoah and connecting to the founding of the state.
In my senior year, the war broke out, shock to everybody. I enlisted in the Navy, where we served in the Pacific. There was an article that appeared in the Time magazine. It was an article about a man named Ziegelboim. Ziegelboim had been in the Warsaw Ghetto. Wife and children were still there, and they smuggled him out so he could come to the West to tell the Jews of the world, of America and Britain, what was going on inside the Warsaw Ghetto and of the killings, which the Germans took great pains to hide. He quickly became discouraged and despondent by their lack of attention and seriousness, and he went back to his room and committed suicide. That had a profound impact upon me. I cut the article out of the Time magazine right there in the room where it was lying on a table, and I kept it. At the end of the war, I was admitted to the Harvard Law School. We began to learn about the concentration camps, what really went on, and about the Jews trying to get out of Europe, to get into Palestine. And I, by sheer chance, grew up in the United States, nurtured, school, place to eat and sleep all the time, secure. And there was an imbalance here, a real imbalance. I had the good life and they had horror. It was an imbalance that had to be righted. I mean, we couldn't just sit in law school while this was going on. This was history being made. We didn't go back to our second year in law school, just didn't go back. They flew us down to Miami, the Palmach guys from New York, where they took us dockside, and there was this hulk. It was a boat that didn't inspire confidence. We prepared our ship, which carried 20 officers and men. We prepared this ship so that it could accept and safely carry 1,500 people. We set out to the coast of Italy to pick up our Mapilim. In the middle of the night, the Mapilim coming from the shore, they came to the side of the ship. We had the Jacob's ladder, rope ladders. These people, men, women, children, different ages, were not only obliged to climb up this difficult ladder to get aboard the ship, but it had to be done in a hurry. I was down below when an elderly gentleman came down the corridor, and I was urging him to get in, urging people to move, and he stopped me, and he said to me in Yiddish, he said, "Wait a minute," he said, "I was once balabos in my own house." Well, it struck me right in the heart. I mean, and I could imagine my father, who was a dignified man with his own family and boss in his own house, to be in this situation totally devoid of any status and being pushed and ordered and shoved. And there, but for the grace of God, goes my father, or goes me. And we were loaded and on our way. We're headed for Palestine. When you see human beings who have individual characteristics, they're not just concepts, they're real people. They're Jews. They're like me. We're fellow Jews and what they've been through. It was a profound experience.
To close, I want to reflect on the first two quotes that I started with, the idea of our obligation to ask our parents and grandparents to share their stories, and the obligation to share our own stories with our children and with the next generation. And to add to that one more idea also from Pesach, and that is the obligation, chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. One of the purposes of what we try and accomplish at the Seder is that everybody should see themselves as if they themselves went out of Egypt. And the Rambam adds to that, and he changes it slightly, and he says, chayav adam laharot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. A person has to show themselves what it was like as if they went out from Egypt. And I think that one of what these interviews can accomplish, one of the things that they can accomplish is to be able to present for us the imagination of what it might have been like and what people had gone through so that we can relate to it. And what we are planning to do in the next stage is we are going to set the entire archive, make it available to people via YouTube, via our new home in the National Library of Israel, and to catalog the material and to develop educational material that will enable people to evaluate, experience, see these different choices that people made, and to try and incorporate that so that they can get a better understanding of what this era was like and get a greater appreciation of the miracles of the founding of the State of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing this project and these stories. I think as important as it is to talk about it today, we're going to look back down the line, and the value of this initiative and this project will be immeasurable. And I appreciate you coming today and joining us. Next up, we have Marty Herskowitz. And Marty Herskowitz, can you turn your video on, please?
Sure.
Great. Is also a second generation Holocaust survivor. He's a poet.
If it's disabled.
Oh, everything okay?
I'm on two different ones. One has a camera and one doesn't.
Okay. So I will, let's see what's happening here. As you get that set up, Marty Herskowitz is a second generation Holocaust survivor. He's a poet, he is an Ole. He has also started something called the Creating Memory Initiative, which he will speak to us about, which is an innovative Holocaust education initiative. Marty, how's it going?
Not good.
Oh, wait, okay. Let's see.
Okay, I left my other one. I'm just on one.
Okay. I can hear you. I just can't see you.
Okay.
Okay.
So then just listen, and you don't have to see. You can put up what you have, pictures,
Excellent.
Or you can put up my poem, whatever you want.
Well,
okay.
Let's just start. I think that my introduction might not have done you justice. Can you please introduce yourself to everybody here, please?
Okay, my name is Marty Herskowitz. I'm second generation. My parents never spoke about the Holocaust. And when it really, and I knew that they didn't want to speak of the Holocaust, and I tried to repress the whole thing and, ignore it and try to live my life like a normal life. And when I was about 45, I realized I needed to connect to their story, but they could not, talk about it. So I started writing poetry, and via the creative process, I connected to the idea of creating a Holocaust narrative. And a couple of years ago, I started a project called Creating Memory, where the same thing that I did as far as connecting to the Holocaust via the creative process. I'm doing it with third and fourth generation, so that they also can create their own narrative via the creative process. We hold creative writing workshops, film workshops, playback workshops, in which themes of the Holocaust, such as parting, family, the idea of faith, themes that are also consistent with their lives, and that the youth can connect to, and by creating along these themes, they also connect to the Holocaust.
That sounds fascinating. And you go and you do this in
high
schools
and pre-army courses, mechinot, yeshivot, midrashot. We do it in rabbinical schools. And we do it for the general public also.
And I understand you've had quite an incredible reaching audiences that in my mind, I never would have dreamed Holocaust
these things. I mean, I've reached. Last week I did a program in Rwanda, because they're having now their Yom Hashoah, where the Hutu and the Tutsi talk about remembering the murders and working through the trauma. And I've also worked with a museum, the Crossroads of Civilization Museum in Dubai, to help them create their Holocaust exhibit. That was, they just had the first Holocaust ceremony there.
I think we have a picture of that. Maybe we can take a look now and see.
Okay,
for me, especially just the idea that there's a Holocaust education, Holocaust museum taking place in Dubai feels monumental. I mean, that seems like it's a, I don't think I could have imagined that happening 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing.
And I see you have a display and there's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
What was that experience like being in Dubai?
I wasn't in Dubai. I just said, I mean, the person asked for materials and I sent him materials and we discussed how to deal with it and everything like that. But it was basically Ben Sales, who was the curator of this exhibit, took my materials and made the exhibition. I was not in Dubai ever. I hope to get there one day or whatever.
Well, it'll come.
Yeah.
That's whether you were there or not, I think it's truly remarkable. And would you feel comfortable sharing one of your poems with us? There's one that
I have a poem that talks about finding the words, how important it is that we not only have silence, but that we also find the words for that we find the words for it. I'll give a little background to it. In 2003, I made my first visit to Auschwitz, my first and only visit to Auschwitz. And when I was there, they wanted to walk in silence. And I said, I thought about this whole idea and I said, I spend my whole life being silent. I want to find the words because I need to touch the pain via the words. And so this is what the poem is called, Ineffable. 1 second, I'll bring it up on my screen.
We have it up here as well, if you can see that.
Yeah, I can't see it because
okay.
a big screen. And okay. In the face of the ineffable, there can be no words, they say, only silence. But my life has been measured by decades of silence, not mere kilometers. So the crunch of flagstones, the swirl of winds, even the tears are no stand. Here in Auschwitz, silence will not suffice. For when words return, they return as they were, like seeds scattered on the frozen ground. But if a voice can rise from the destruction to parse therewith a syntax of the pain, then words entombed shall resurgent flow, words whose tears may heal the soul again. So I feel that what we need for the future of Holocaust remembrance is less of a historical and less a documentary remembrance and more of an emotional attachment to what happened. That I feel that the future generations, if we cannot, first of all, allow them their own narrative and allow them to emotionally attach to it and via the creative process, then the remembrance will be less effective. And I think that in order for it to go on for generations, we have to find new ways of remembering. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think what you're saying is critically important. We have in the last 100 years, just incredible history of the Jewish people from the founding of the state and the Holocaust and the creation of the state and the building of the state and where we are today, where we have the luxury of people choosing to come here and choosing to build, not necessarily fleeing anything, but coming to something to contribute. I think it is of utmost importance that we hear the stories of our history, of where we came from, of our families, of our people. And I think that in all three people who spoke here tonight, and thank you very much for attending, bring that to the table, and they're helping, and they had such valuable, meaningful words. I hope everybody enjoyed this webinar. And I thank you very much for coming. And I hope we will see you at other Nefesh B'Nefesh events. Thank you very much.